You're listening to The Voluntary Life, where you can hear ideas for finding freedom in an unfree world. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to connect with the show and hear all past episodes. Here's your host, Jake.
Hi, it's Jake here. Welcome to The Voluntary Life. This episode is about entrepreneurship. I'm sharing a chapter from the audiobook of my book, Becoming an Entrepreneur. This chapter is about financing your business. Getting finance is both one of the biggest challenges facing entrepreneurs and also one of the least understood aspects of starting a business. I think you'll find the discussion useful whether or not you are interested in creating a startup, or even if you're just interested in a side hustle. You'll probably still face some questions about how you're going to finance your business, even in the first stages, whatever the scale of the business. If you enjoy this episode, I recommend that you check out the whole book, Becoming an Entrepreneur. You can get it in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, and you can also get it on Audible in audiobook format. I'll put links to all those in the show notes. So without further delay, here's a chapter from my book, Becoming an Entrepreneur. Chapter 6. The Best Funding There Is. Watch out when anyone, including you, says he wants to do something big but can't until he raises the money. It usually means the person is more in love with the idea of being big than with actually doing something useful. For an idea to get big, it has to be useful. And being useful doesn't need funding. Jake Desyllas. I was ignorant about finance when I started my business. The fact that I've always been relatively frugal gave me an advantage, as I had some savings that I could use to fund the startup period. However, I still depleted all my reserves, took on debts, and spent more than I needed in order to get the business going. Over time, I came to understand a much better way to fund a business. Employee conditioning provides no preparation for the challenges of raising capital in a business. When you're an employee, someone else created your job for you. You work in a building leased or bought by someone else, using resources obtained for you by someone else. How did it all get there? As an employee, that's not your concern. In contrast, if you do want to start a business, you have this completely unfamiliar challenge of how to finance it. Nothing in your employee life prepares you for how to tackle financing questions. Yet every entrepreneur faces the same question at the beginning. How do you finance the initial period of developing your capability before you start making big sales? The way that you choose to tackle this question can have a huge impact on the level of autonomy that you experience as an entrepreneur. On the one hand, you lack resources in the beginning and you need resources in order to create a new business. On the other hand, the more funding that you take from other people, the less autonomy you have, thereby removing one of the most appealing aspects of starting a business. My short answer to the funding question for the vast majority of startups is this. The best way to finance your business is through your own money, incrementally through sales income from the business itself, supplemented at the start by your own savings if necessary. Funding yourself is better for your business focus, your autonomy as an entrepreneur, and your ultimate financial freedom. In this chapter, I will explain how to fund yourself and why I think it is the best way to go. We'll also review the other options open to you and look at how they compare. Bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is the ultimate solution for any entrepreneur who wants to preserve their freedom. The term bootstrapping comes from the idea of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. In other words, you are financing your own growth. If you do finance yourself, then you do not have to sell partial ownership of your business, you do not have to pay back loans, and you do not have to deal with all of the complications involved in getting finance from other people. If you can bootstrap yourself, you can maintain maximum control. There are two ways of bootstrapping. First, you can finance yourself through your own savings. If you have some money saved when you start your business, then you can draw on that money to finance the initial period before you start bringing in revenue. The more savings you have, the longer you will have before you go into debt. There's no better way to ensure that you are working on something that you really believe in than to ask yourself if you're willing to use your own savings and risk your own earning capacity in pursuing it. You are asking everyone, yourself included, to vote with their wallets about whether your project is really worth it. Is your idea important enough that you are willing to put your own money into it? If not, then it's probably not your life's work. Also, you can be pretty sure that nobody else is going to fund your venture if you don't even demonstrate that you are willing to do so yourself, as far as you're able. I funded my business with my own savings at first. I had some savings that I'd accumulated in my 20s, and so did my business partner. We both put money into the business to get things moving. It was not enough for us to get into positive cash flow, and I will explain more about the other things that we did, but it enabled us to start developing our services. Bootstrapping with your own savings is a great thing to do if you can. Obviously, it's dependent on building up savings, which can take significant time. This is why it's so much harder to start an entrepreneurial venture if you already have outstanding debt. The sooner in life that you start a business, the better, because the older you get, the more commitments you will have, especially if you want to have children. It is definitely going to make the startup period easier if you do it before you have other significant financial responsibilities. That will help you reduce your need for financing and give you a much easier start to the business. I had no debt, no major financial commitments, no kids or mortgage, and some savings. Revenue financing. The other way to bootstrap is to finance the growth of your business through revenue itself. This is essentially the do not spend any money until you have it plan. It is difficult to do because there are always great arguments as to why you need to spend money in the beginning. Whatever business you start, you will probably focus on the things that you need to put in place in order to be credible. Perhaps you will spend money making an amazing website, or perhaps developing technology. All such things cost money. The idea behind revenue-based self-financing is to fund the initial period before you can make big sales with your full product by making little sales with your minimum viable product. Every business that will be useful in the long term has value of some kind to offer customers in the beginning. If you can start selling that value in a simple form as quickly as possible, you can use revenue to finance the growth of the business and develop a more complex offering as you go. Even if you intend to develop a capital-intensive business, for example, one that involves a lot of technology, you might be able to start a capital-light version 1.0 of the business that helps customers in the present, and then incrementally develop a capital-intensive version 2.0 as you go. Financing yourself through revenue is emotionally challenging. It puts you in the uncomfortable position of going out and selling as quickly as possible with a minimum viable product. I resisted this approach for the first 2 years because I was uncomfortable with it. It was much easier to do interesting and safe things like develop our website, develop our technology, and focus on other behind-the-scenes stuff that was less emotionally challenging than selling. Crowdsourced revenue financing. One great kind of revenue financing that has become far easier recently is crowdfunding. This involves an advance sale to a wide group of your customers or fans. In short, you ask customers to support the development of your product by paying money in advance of you actually developing it. If you raise enough capital, you develop the product and eventually your supporters get their purchased item. Sometimes they don't even get the final product, but rather some other reward, perhaps just the good feeling of having helped you get your business off the ground. The model builds on the idea of a subscription-based service, whereby customers pay now to receive a subscription in the future. Crowdfunding is a brilliant solution to the question of how to finance your startup through revenue. It's great for your cash flow since you don't have an outlay before having guaranteed customers. It engages you in marketing and selling right at the beginning, enabling you to get valuable feedback from customers before you start spending serious money. Crowdfunding also carries the advantage of being virtually risk-free with regard to marketing and sales. If your idea gets funded, you start out with an audience of committed buyers. If not, you've just learned, without significant expense, that your idea still needs work. There are many services online providing a platform for crowdsourcing, such as Kickstarter and Indiegogo. It's well worth considering a crowdsourced development. Why revenue financing is best. Revenue financing serves as a test of your business strategy. If you can sell a simple version of your product to someone right now, it is a strong indication that you are doing the right thing. If you can't sell anything, then that is valuable information that requires a response. You probably need to adjust your strategy, which is always easier to do early on, before you expend a huge amount of time and effort. When you pursue revenue financing, you automatically avoid going into more debt than necessary. If you ignore revenue in the initial period and focus on product development, you can spend a lot of money to get your initial product or service ready without knowing anything about whether it will sell. If you are financing through loans, that could mean taking on a lot of debt. However, if you are financing through revenue, you get automatic feedback from the market. No sales means no more spending. Back to the drawing board. Revenue financing is the best way to enjoy autonomy as an entrepreneur. It allows you to avoid the constraint of being beholden to funders who have their own needs. If you apply the approach of doing what people will pay for to financing, what you get is revenue financing. It keeps you focused on customer needs and on what will sell, which will inform you as to how to invest wisely in your own research and development, or R&D. Even though it is difficult, bootstrapping by revenue financing is a brilliant option that I urge you to consider for your own business. Loans. There is a huge difference between taking out loans to fund personal consumption, e.g. buying a car or a house, and using loans to start a value-producing enterprise. Many people are so loaded up with consumption debt that they do not feel able to take the risk of starting a business. Consumption debt limits your opportunities. It is a particularly disempowering aspect of the employee mentality. However, if you use loans to develop an entrepreneurial venture, you are investing in potential future income generation. The easiest way to take out a loan for your business is to start by asking friends and family, which is what I did. After taking small personal loans from my bank and my father, I approached an entrepreneur friend about financing the startup. Initially, we discussed him taking a share ownership in the business, but we settled on him providing a loan. With interest, it amounted to over £150,000, the equivalent of over $246,000. It took 5 years to pay it back. There are other places that you may be able to get loans. You can try to get a bank loan, although it is difficult to borrow much money from banks for startups. There are alternative financing websites that link lenders to small businesses. However, your friends and family members are in a far better position to understand what it is that you're doing. You have already earned their trust. They also have a vested interest in wanting to help you. The fact that I took personal loans was a strong motivator for me to keep going until my business reached profitability, not only because I didn't want to have a large debt hanging over me, but also because I cared about the people who had lent me money. I wanted to make sure that I repaid the trust that they showed me. Selling equity. Selling equity in your company is giving part ownership of the business to somebody else in return for financing. An investor provides money to fund the startup and, in return, the entrepreneur gives the investor a share of the ownership of the business. This is the classic entrepreneur's dream that became so popular in the 1990s tech boom. Have a cool idea, get venture capital firms to finance it, and thereby avoid the personal risk associated with taking out loans. Many entrepreneurs in that period took the attitude that raising financing was a way to fund their own consumption of other people's money, rather than a way to offer funders a better use for their resources. This method of financing is very appealing to entrepreneurs because it reduces the amount of risk involved for them. It sounds great, but this is actually a very expensive way of financing your business. A venture capital firm is only going to want to invest in a business if they can make a significant return on their investment, because investing in startups is very risky. Consequently, they're going to want perhaps a 20-fold return on investment, because one successful investment has to cover all startups they fund that do not give them any return. Understandably, they want enough control and influence to ensure that the company works towards their interests. You can look at venture capital as a loan combined with an extremely expensive failure to pay back insurance policy. When those investors exit, they want to see a far higher return than with a normal loan because they are effectively insuring you against financial risk. You pay for reducing your own risk as an entrepreneur, and you will pay very highly for that. With venture capital, you also see startups turn into machines for obtaining financing. The entrepreneurs become completely preoccupied with doing presentations to venture capital firms or other potential financing sources, and this becomes the purpose driving their business. It is the opposite of the revenue financing approach. The pursuit of revenue financing focuses on the needs of your customers, whereas the pursuit of venture capital focuses on making presentations to get funding. I considered selling equity to the entrepreneur friend that I mentioned earlier. When I initially approached him, I wanted him to invest in the company. During negotiations, it became clear to me that selling equity would be significantly more expensive than a loan, as he wanted a majority stake in the business. I valued my freedom of action and my control over the business more than I valued the reduced risk. That's why I decided not to sell equity. Financing comes down to a trade-off between maximizing your freedom and minimizing your financial risk. If you want maximum freedom, then it makes sense to finance the startup through bootstrapping without selling off any of your business. If you want maximum safety, you can attempt to offload risk onto others and cede part ownership of the venture in return. But owning a business yourself is one of the reasons that you started it in the first place. So there comes a point at which one must ask, why bother being a founder if the business is not really yours? The unexamined business and financing. In Chapter 5, we looked at how tracking your business is more important than planning. This applies to financing too. It's very easy to focus on your intentions for getting money and pay too little attention to the real circumstances of your financial position. If you always stay fully conscious about the financial position of your business by tracking and analyzing your financing data, you will be able to make better decisions about funding. The most valuable thing that you can do to become conscious about the financial position of your business is this: start tracking forward cash flow from day one. You need to know how much money will be coming in and going out each week as far into the future as possible, taking into account all committed revenue and spending. You can use the forward cash flow tracking feature within your general accounting software to do this, or create your own tool in a spreadsheet. Whatever tool you use, you will need one that can show you your projected cash flow for the next 3 to 6 months, or as far forward as realistically possible, so that you know when you're going to pay each bill and when you expect to receive each payment. You may end up bankrupt if you're not able to anticipate the timing of your cash flow. During the first 2 years, we had many near emergencies in which we were surprised to find that we had less money than expected. This was usually because we had not anticipated predictable events, such as a client paying their invoice late. It's easy to look at annual numbers and think you're going to make enough, but your cash flow may get so out of sync with your expenses that you can't make payroll or pay the bills. You need to be able to anticipate shocks to your cash flow, such as a project taking longer than expected or a customer not paying on time. If you are conscious of the status of your cash flow, you are far better able to plan and respond to crises. For this reason, it's crucial to start using a forward cash flow planning tool as soon as you can. As a business owner, any cash flow problem affects you personally. I did not pay myself at all for the first year of my business and only intermittently for the second. After a friend and advisor helped set up our cash flow planning tool, I gained enough control to pay myself regularly. Cash flow planning is the most valuable activity that you can undertake to increase your awareness about your finances. As a side benefit, you gain all sorts of other useful information in the process, such as who the late payers are. You can rank your customers in terms of their payment reliability, which will let you know about any customers who cause you more problems than they are worth. Do you need financing? The final thing to consider about financing is the question of how much money you really need. Entrepreneurs often start with the assumption that they need a lot of financing. I had this assumption. I took out loans to finance the business before I knew how to spend the money wisely. Consequently, in the first year, I spent money on stuff that, in hindsight, was not worthwhile. For example, the entrepreneur friend who lent us the money believed that it was very important for us to have an office, so clients could see that we meant business and we were here to stay. So we got an office, and nobody was remotely interested in visiting us in that first year. Having an office was nice, but we could have significantly reduced our financing needs if we had not rented the premises so quickly. It's prudent to question how much you actually need financing and to look carefully at what you think you need to spend money on. The temptation is to spend money rather than go and earn it, because earning via selling is psychologically so much harder. In the early days, we spent a lot of money on things that we could have financed with revenue later. For example, we developed the software that eventually became part of our unique selling proposition. However, none of the revenue that we made in the first year required this software. Funding makes it very easy to avoid the most uncomfortable actions that you need to take as a business owner. The first year in business exposes your personal weaknesses and shows what you need to resolve in yourself in order to be effective. For me, this was selling. Without the luxury of funding, however, you know that if you don't do the uncomfortable tasks, then you will go under, so you do them. It may be that I had to run out of money in order to find the resolve to confront my most uncomfortable business tasks. This could be the case for you too. It's better to take less funding and run out of money sooner rather than later if that is what helps you change your approach to the business. If you can reduce the amount of money you need in order to finance your startup, you will make life simpler. The more money you need, the bigger the stakes in terms of the amount of sales you will need to make, and the more stress you will feel. The less financing and debt you take on in the beginning, the easier it is to fulfill your obligations to your funders, providing them with a more productive use of their resources. The less money you take, the easier it will be for you to achieve positive cash flow and then profit. Here are the 3 most important things to remember about funding. 1. Self-financing through revenue is by far the best financing there is. It keeps your business focused and maintains your freedom and independence. Whenever you are considering any investment into your business, the most useful question to ask is whether you can finance it through revenue. It may not be possible to rely on revenue alone. It wasn't for me. but the benefits mean it's certainly worth trying. 2. Track your cash flow position as far into the future as possible. It is your early warning system when it comes to financing. 3. You probably do not need nearly as much financing as you think. You may even need to run out of money in order to achieve the psychological changes necessary for your growth as a business owner.
Thank you for listening to The Voluntary Life. If you like this podcast, please show your support by becoming a patron of The Voluntary Life on Patreon. Your support will help to grow and improve the show, and you'll get access to a treasure trove of rewards, including bonus episodes. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to learn more.